good morning, fifth grade. I am so glad you are here today, and it might not be morning there. I notice I always say good morning, even when I'm taping at night or in the middle of the day. I just say good morning because I don't know when you're watching. Okay, so today I'm going to be seated because my back is bothering me, and I'm really sorry about that. But you know how that happens sometimes with my back issues. So it's all good. So today we're going to be continuing on page 444 to 447, and we're going to be continuing with Obama and his presidency and some of the challenges that he faces at the second term of his presidency. Okay, so we're going to be talking about Syria, and we're going to be talking about what happens there after the troops are pulled out, and it will explain why we still have troops there today, including my son Sam. Next, we're going to be looking at the rise of ISIS, okay, which is actually called the Islamic State, but they ended up being called ISIS, and we'll see how this terrorist group fills that power void. I've been talking to you all along about power voids and how when they occur, they're not a good thing, and how when that happens, certain groups can come in and make it even worse than it was before, which we saw in the Arab Spring. We're also going to be looking at his issues with Iran. There's a lot of issues that arise with Iran, and we try to solve it with money, and it doesn't work. And we're still dealing with the whole Iran thing, the decisions that President Obama had made. We're still dealing with the consequences of those today. Remember, I've told you, when you grow up and you become 18 and you can vote, to really think about who you're voting for. What do they stand for? What do they believe? What are they going to do when they're in office? Because the things they do will affect your life and the lives of people to come. Remember, we talked about some of the decisions that Roosevelt had made? Franklin Delano, not Theodore, although we did talk about those too. But the ones that Franklin made that we're still dealing with today, yes, and the decisions that that LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, made that we're still dealing with today. So it goes way beyond your lifetime or their term in office. So it's really important to know who and what you're voting for. All right, continue. Russia. We're going to look at the issues that arise in Russia. Okay, so there's a lot of issues, foreign policy issues that occur during this time in Obama's presidency. All right, are we ready? So here we go. Syria. So remember, Syria was part of the Arab Spring, and they don't have a lot of peace there in Syria. So what happens is in 2011, the president, Bashar al-Assad, which I'll just be calling him Assad from now on, he is struggling to maintain power. So the country of Syria is actually divided into two groups, those who want to keep Assad and those who want to get rid of Assad. And the rebels, which are the ones who want to get rid of Assad, are supported by President Obama. He thinks that, that they should do that. Get rid of the prez. So he does say in a public speech, directing it to Assad that, hey, if you use chemical weapons on your people, then America will do something about that. America's not going to stand by and let you, throw mustard gas or nerve gas or any other chemical weapon at your people. So what happens is in August of 2013, there is evidence, pure evidence, that Assad has indeed used chemical weapons. Well, Obama doesn't like to go into war. Remember, he was opposed to the Iraq War. He wanted to take home the troops, which he did, and he wanted out of Afghanistan, and it was just a real big issue. He doesn't do war, just his belief, no war. So now he comes up with this dilemma. He made a threat. Um, if you use chemical weapons, America will do something. But is he going to really do something? Because he doesn't like war. Okay? And here's the fun little thing. You can't just like run in and bomb people and run out. Okay? So what Obama decides to do is nothing. So Assad continues on his retaining of his power, and it becomes a huge issue until I think he was taken out of power. It doesn't actually say in our book, but if I remember right, he eventually I can't remember. Never mind. Forget it. Forget I said anything. I should never speculate. That means to say something you think could be true, but you're not for sure. So I don't know what happened to Assad. I can't remember. And it's not in the book. All right. So let's move on back to Iraq. So remember we talked about Iraq. You have the three groups, the Sunni, the Shiite, and the Kurds, and how they're always fighting with each other. Remember how one group got thrown out of power because they were associated with Osama. No, I was going to say the wrong thing. Saddam Hussein. There he is. And this left a power vacuum once the United States troops left. Because remember, Obama did keep his campaign promise. President Obama did pull out all the troops from Iraq. And the minute that they left, the fighting began between these guys. And nobody could take power, even though we left a government there. And ISIS comes in to fill the void. Now, they called themselves the Islamic State. They declared that they were in charge of ruling all Muslims in all the world. And they were not a very nice group of people, okay? They came in and they started capturing different cities in Syria and Iraq. Again, we have this turmoil going on in Syria at the time, thusly leaving power vacuums here too, because Assad's power is being questioned and threatened, and they start to kill Christians. Okay? They are killing Christians, and people in the United States are very upset because these killings are very public. They're taped and put on Al Jazeera TV, and it's just really quite nasty. So President Obama has to make another decision. So he's got some options. He can do nothing like he did with the chemical warfare. Okay, that's always an option, to do nothing. He can send in troops. Okay, do nothing. He can send in troops to American troops, but that's a problem because remember, he made a campaign promise. He was bringing them home. There were no more troops in Iraq, and we would be done with that. So does he go back on his promise and send in troops? Or he can help the government that is already there in Iraq that the United States helped set up, which we called the legal government. Okay, that's what we called it. I just put it in quotes just because, yeah. Because we do this sometimes. We go to other countries and we set up governments and we try to make democracies. But to be honest, democracy without God is dead in the water. Okay. So what happens is Obama's first decision is to try to help the government that was set up in Iraq, which is really the best decision because you already have this infrastructure that you set up. The problem is that the American people really aren't convinced that the Iraqi government is legit because the Iraqi government are the ones who let ISIS come in the first place. So they are very concerned that this isn't a real solution. And it divides the country. A lot of President Obama's decisions divided the country. which is why we have a super divided country today. Again, who will you vote for? Okay, and it's not that he did necessarily bad things, but a lot of American people had very strong feelings about things, such as ISIS. Very strong feelings about people being killed because of their religious beliefs, which is part of our foundation as our nation, is that you're allowed to have different religious beliefs and you shouldn't be killed for those things. And so the decision to help the government made a lot of American people upset. Other American people who did not want him to do return troops, they were happy. So it caused a great division in the country. After he works with the government and sees that nothing's really changing, President Obama does send in troops, which again divides the nation. So the American nation. So the people who wanted him to send in troops to begin with are like, yes, finally he's done something. And the people who didn't want him to send troops and wanted him just to keep working with the government said, what are you doing? You made a promise. So that divided the nation as well. Okay. Sometimes you just struggle. Decisions as a president are hard. You're not going to please everybody, and they're hard. All right, so all this turmoil is going on, and in pops Iran. So Iran is in the Middle East. I know you're surprised by that, aren't you? Along with Syria, and Iraq, and Israel, yes. So Iran is also in the Middle East. And when President Jimmy Carter, I don't know if you remember this from Jimmy Carter's chapter, but when President Jimmy Carter was the president, his decision to bring peace to the Middle East was to give weapons to Iraq, which I thought I wrote up here somewhere, and Iraq, and Iran. Because he decided if they both had equal weapons, so he gave them both U.S. Planes, fighter planes. He gave them bombs. He gave them missiles. He gave them all kinds of things. Because his opinion was this: if you give both of these enemies, because Iraq and Iran, they fought each other for ever. They've been always fighting. But he thought if they gave them both weapons, okay, that there'd be peace because they wouldn't fight about it, because they would both have the same weapons and they would both know, hey, if I go to war with that guy, he's got the same weapons as me and he'll just bomb me. It didn't work. They used their weapons that the United States gave them to attack each other. Okay? And then at some point in 1979, they became our enemy, just to add to the fun. Okay? And we had been enemies with them since 1979. Not because presidents hadn't tried to make peace with Iran, but Iran's slogan at the time, the Gaddafi, was death to America. It's hard to work with people who want you to die as a whole country. But people tried. Lots of presidents tried, and President Obama was one of those as well. So in 1980, it became apparent that Iran was developing nuclear weapons. There had been presidents who had found where the factories of nuclear weapons were being made, and they would drop a couple bombs on it. But President Obama, he had a different plan. His plan was to sign a treaty and give them billions of dollars and say, please stop that. Okay? So they signed the treaty, gave billions of dollars, and guess what Iran did? They used the money to continue their nuclear weapons development. Okay? So go way back to 1940s, the end of the World War II, when we ended up dropping nuclear weapons on Japan to bring the war to an end. People did not really understand how nuclear bombs worked at the time. And so we were developing nuclear bombs. Germany was developing nuclear bombs. And after the war ended, the nuclear bomb thing in Germany all disappeared because they weren't allowed to have a standing army. That's part of the treaty. They weren't allowed to have a whole bunch of stuff. Okay. And then Russia decided, well, America has it, we're going to have it too. And after America and Russia both had the nuclear bomb, and we kind of figured out more what it does, there was actually this non-proliferation treaty. Ooh, big word, non-proliferation. Oh. I said it good the first time. So what that means is that they're not going to allow other countries to have nuclear weapons. Okay, and it was actually illegal to help another country have a nuclear weapon. It was illegal to give a country a nuclear weapon. It was illegal to give a country plans of how to create a nuclear weapon. And Russia and America basically have tried to stop every other country from making nukes. That's short for a nuclear weapon, in case you're wondering. Okay, the Anti-Proliferation Treaty was to stop, so proliferation, I can only say it once apparently. It basically is people having more, okay, developing more. And so they did not want that in every country because, as you see, chemical weapons that we have today are used on the people. And so that was their concern, and they didn't want that to happen. Well, to be honest, it's also probably because, America and Russia want to be the big guys on the block and not have to have a weapons race with anybody else, just each other. All right? So that did not work. I don't know where Iran is. I know when President Trump came into office that he took that agreement, because I guess I don't remember if it was really a treaty. It was supposed to be, but he took that agreement and he nullified it. So it couldn't have been a treaty because a president can't nullify a treaty unless Congress agrees, and Congress didn't agree. So whatever kind of agreement they had and the money we sent them and all that, President Trump said, this is not good for America. This is not good for the world. We are not honoring this anymore. It's all done. Okay, which again divides the nation, because some people are like, wait, no, Iran not develop nuclear weapons without the agreement, and they'll drop it on other countries. And then other people are like, well, yeah, that was a terrible deal. There was, we're going to trust you to do this. We're not even going to come in and look. Remember Saddam Hussein? We had to go in and look. He didn't let us look, but there wasn't even a come look thing. So it's just all craziness. I don't know. But he tried. Yeah, I mean, this Middle East conflict thing has been going on since biblical times. It really has. And every U.S. president comes in and tries to bring peace to the Middle East. If they read their Bible, they'll discover there's never going to be peace in the Middle East until the Antichrist comes. Then there will be peace all over the world unless, you want to be killed for not maintaining peace, which will happen. All right. So, Revelation, read it. Okay. Let me see if I missed anything in here. Okay, so one of the things about the Iranian deal is Iran not only wants death to America, but they also want death to Israel. So President Obama said that his agreement would help keep Israel safe. And Israel didn't agree. In fact, Israel at one point told the U.S. about a nuclear facility in Iran that was still operating even after the agreement. President Obama chose to not do anything about that. He chose to believe in the agreement, which was his choice, yes. Israel chose not to go with that, and they actually went in and dropped bombs on the facility in Iran. Which caused, guess what? Guess what it caused? Division in the United States. You were right. Very good. So the division in the United States was, hey, Israel should be allowed to defend themselves, and if the United States isn't going to help them out, then they need to do it on their own. And the other group was, hey, Israel, they're being bullies, and they should just trust what we're doing. And so another division in the United States occurred with that as well. So our next issue, Russia. So Vladimir Putin became the leader of Russia, and Vladimir Putin is from way back when Russia was like a superpower, and it was all the USSR, and so he kind of decided to do a little saber rattling. So saber rattling is like when you, it comes from taking your sword and rattling it and saying, "I'm going to attack you." Okay, that's what's called. It means you're talking about war, but you're not necessarily fighting. You might be showing some weaponry, but you're not necessarily shooting at anybody. So it's called saber rattling. Vladimir Putin, he did a lot of saber rattling. He said, Russia's going to rise again. We're going to be a great power. We're going to take over. We're going to be great again like the USSR. We're going to grab these nations up again, and we're all going to be together. Now, part of those nations were the Ukraine. Okay, the Ukraine was part of Russia until it got its independence, and there's issues in the Ukraine. So in 2014, I don't know if you can see that, there were riots in Ukraine that forced our president to step in, what was happening was people in the Ukraine were saying, "Hey, we want to be friends with the U.S.," and others were saying, "Hey, we want to go back to Russia." And so there was fighting and arguing and rioting. And you guys have seen rioting now that you've seen the Ferguson thing. So rioting doesn't mean like just protesting. Rioting means like destroying things and hurting people. All right, so that is what was happening. The Ukraine kind of puts that down, the government, and then the Crimean Peninsula erupts into violence and into protest. And they definitely want to go back to Russia. And Russia's more than happy to take them back. Because again, Russia wanted all of Ukraine. So Russia goes in. Now again, it's like America. It's not everybody who wants to go back to Russia or everybody who wants to be with the United States. Is like a group of people. So a group of people on the Crimean Peninsula want to go back to Russia, and a group probably did not. I'm sure there were people who were like, "What are you talking about? Don't you remember?" Because people forget. Remember the children of Israel, Moses takes them out of Egypt, and they go, "We want to go back to Egypt because we can eat onions and we can have garlic." It's like, yeah, and you were a slave. Hello. Do you remember being a slave? Do you remember the Pharaoh? Do you remember the slave drivers that made you build things and make bricks yourself? Are you thinking about those things? No, they weren't. They were thinking about onions and garlic and forgetting that they were a slave. So the same kind of thing is happening here. Some people are like, "Hey, wait, do you remember how Russia is?" And they're like, "No, we love Russia. We want to go back." So what ends up happening is Russia goes in and takes over the Crimean Peninsula, and so it is still in Russia control today. Again, Obama has a decision. And this time his decision is kind of tough because he actually supported the rebels in this. So he decides to just kind of stay out of the whole thing. That is his plan. Okay, so the Ukraine, because see, the Ukraine asked the U.S. for help to get Russia out of the Crimean Peninsula, because the Crimean Peninsula is part of the Ukraine. It's kind of like in the Civil War when the southern states seceded. They were part of the United States, but imagine if when the southern states seceded, say France came in and took them over. It's kind of like that idea. Okay, so Crimea is taken over by Russia and is still held as a part of Russia today, which does not make a lot of people super happy. All right. So Obama continued to support the rebels through this whole thing, through the whole process, even when the rebels started shooting civilians. Okay, I guess casualties of war, maybe something like that. All right. So again, all of these instances continue to divide the nation of the United States. The reason is that some people like the way Obama is handling things. Some people don't. Some people are very concerned about Christians being killed off by ISIS. And ISIS did all kinds of other stuff too that was terrible. Eventually, of course, President Obama does send the troops in, but we're still dealing with the ISIS stuff. It's not as bad as it was. But again, when there's a power void, somebody else is going to come in there. And a lot of people were concerned about Russia recapturing all of Eastern Europe. In fact, the people who lived in Eastern Europe were concerned about Russia recapturing them. And then when the Crimean Peninsula occurred, they were like, see, look, we told you. And other people were like, it's fine, the Crimean Peninsula, those people want to go back to Russia, it's all good. So it's a balancing act, okay? And he made the decisions he thought were right at the time, and only history will tell. Not this history book, because this is too close to the history, but later when people start analyzing the results of his decisions, will history tell if he made the right ones or not? Okay? It's hard to be president. It really is. All right, so I will see you tomorrow, and we will continue with President Obama's presidency, and we're going to look at more domestic issues, more things to divide the nation. All right? Bye-bye.